So this is going to be a video demo, so let me position things correctly here. Okay, so I'm doing a demo on this thing. Sorry you won't be able to see my face too well, but I want to be able to show you what this thing actually is. So what this represents two things that I want to talk about. And I'm really sorry that you only see my mouth moving. Let's do it like that. On one hand, this represents my journey last year, my woodworking journey from a amateur carpenter to being able to do fine woodworking. So what is this thing? This is an interlocking puzzle called a rotocube. The way this works is you make one piece right here that unlocks the top, which reveals this piece. So that was the locking mechanism there. Then the bottom part is also locked. So again, I move this out and this bottom piece drops out. That was locked into this piece. And then we have these two spiral shaped pieces left. And so the way this works is you do this, do a little dance with these. And now we've got the deconstructed rotocube. So again, I wanted to point out, just a sort of a humble brag, I am super happy about this because it requires a lot of precision, a lot of planning, and it's really kind of a good documentation of where I am on my woodworking journey. Just on the precision part, even to put this together, this has to fit, this has to fit like this, and then you move it over and rotate it again like that, rotate it again, flip it up, pop it in like that. And it really gives you that satisfying click when everything just sort of fits really well. So here, I'll construct the whole thing back together again. So again, sort of this is where I am on my woodworking journey, but this also serves as a sort of a useful analogy to software in a lot of ways, or at least it really highlights a principle that I highly value in software. So first thing we can kind of notice that, rewind your mind 2 minutes ago to when I first showed you this thing. You might have thought, that's kind of an interesting looking cube. I'm not really sure what it is. And even when I said, this is an interlocking puzzle, it may not really click what that really means. But it's not until, you start seeing how this thing is put together that's oh, clearly this is not just a cube. This is something more complicated than that. And I see that as an analogy to software very often, where we are, there's a mock-up or an idea for, integrating with a third party, or, there's this paradox where the easier it is to conceptualize something like a cube or a new web page, a new feature, it usually has an inverse relationship to how complicated that thing's going to be, or what it's going to take to build it. So the principle that I value in software that I like to invoke in woodworking is simplicity. So for example, you talk about the simplicity in the different pieces here. So I could have used more moving parts, but there's no levers, there's no pistons, no batteries, no electronics. These are very, very simple pieces that are put together. And that pays off. That pays off in how these components interact with each other. Here's the bottom locking mechanism. Right, so you got this little hook here, a little catch here. I don't know if you can see it very well, but that's it. These simple pieces interlocking with a simple way is really great when you have something that as a whole becomes ultimately more complicated. This is the locking mechanism of the top. So you've got this little hook thing. I don't know if you can see it on this backdrop here, but it's got a little hook, goes in here, and it locks like this. And when it's in the unlock position, it comes out. These spiral shaped pieces, also, I guess you could, whether they're simple or complex, I guess is up for debate. It depends on your definition here. But whatever your view of them are, how they interact with them is not simple. So again, let me show you how these go together. These are identical pieces, but you have to orient them in a certain way in order to, do this little dance here and pop them in together. So yeah, that's another way of so there's the individual components, whether they're simple or complex, and regardless of that, how those components interact with each other can be simple or complex, and again, preferring simplicity. And then there's also the deconstruction of the individual pieces. Take this, for example, where there's this little ledge that is meant to serve as a latch for the locking mechanism. This is not one piece. This is two pieces that were at half thickness, and on the top piece, I cut out a wider area. On the bottom piece, I cut out a slightly less wide area, glued them back together, and that left me with a very clean corner in the back end here, because that's very hard to get with the chisel. In fact, I broke my first attempt at this by not doing it like that. So I'll try to wrap up here, but again, aside from just like, this is fun from like a woodworking perspective, you'll hear me, you probably heard me before say, mention simplicity and complexity in software terms. And that's because, complexity tends to compound. And so the way I try to get ahead of that is to bring everything back into more simpler forms, because it will become ultimately more complex. And the other takeaway here is like, we can all empathize with, this seems like just a cube, and in a sense it is, but once you know the inner workings and how they interact, we could all understand like, okay, it's not just a cube, it's more involved. And in software, one way to get ahead of that is to show whoever it is you're talking to, product designers, whatever, stakeholders, some of the inner workings to help build that empathy on what is really involved there. So that's my demo, and thanks for listening.